This is a valve adjustment on a 2010 Honda Stateline VT1300 CRA. Our first step is going to be removing the seat, the gas tank, and this gauge here. The seat's not too bad. We have 3 bolts, one on each side, then one at the back, right underneath where I got my sissy bar. This here, there are 2 bolts right there. Just have to undo those and then lift it off the tank. It just, there's some kind of sticky padding there that just comes off. As for the tank, it's a single bolt. You can't see it too well right now. Oh, you see it right there? It's a single bolt. You take that out, then you simply slide the tank towards the rear of the bike. Just pull it with your hands towards the rear of the bike. To take the seat off, you got to take off your side covers, and you're gonna have this whatever this is here. It's kind of hard to get to that bolt with that in the way. There is a little clip here. You're not gonna break it. Just push it down. You'll be able to move it back. So I just push it down like that. It just snaps right out, and I'm able to access the bolt more easily. More easily. When you're removing the tank, you have the option to basically clamp down on the hoses underneath so you don't get gas everywhere, and then you could completely remove the tank, or you could do like me and just sort of toss it on the side. I have it propped up on a chair there. It's not really going to be in the way, and I find it easier than actually clamping it down and removing the tank altogether. I don't want to deal with those gas hoses underneath. However, when you do that, there's a your sensor for your reserve, or for your low gas. You have to unclip it, because if you don't unclip that, you're basically going to force it. And that's these 2 cables here. There's the equivalent pins right underneath the tank, right about here, not too far from the back of the tank, just a little in. Make sure you remember how to put them back on though. Look at the colors on the wires and make sure you got that. Mine is well, the white there is in the front, and I'm partially colorblind. I think that looks like a gray or a green, whatever the darker non-white one is at the back. Now if you follow the manual, they're going to tell you to remove one thing after another, and it's basically a sequence of steps of, okay, remove the tank, then remove the solenoids and whatnot. What you need to do is you need to remove this whole kit here, this plastic bracket here with the solenoids, enough so that you could toss it on the side and still have access to the valves that are underneath. The front ain't too bad, but the rear, you're gonna have to go right underneath there, right in there. So all this cabling is gonna be in the way. What I do is I remove the bolt, which is up front here. I'm gonna remove the bolts for the front solenoid, and then I'm gonna be able to snake my cables. I'm gonna disconnect my spark plug valves, spark plug cables. Then I'm going to be able to snake my cables through this harness in such a way that it's just going to be off to a side. It's not going to be in the way anymore. I do have to unclip a couple things while I'm there. As long as you remember how to put it back together, it shouldn't be a problem. There's a reminder for you if you need. This is clipped in sideways. This one's kind of like on an angle. This one has a clip over here on the side. This cable, believe it or not, gives you a lot of trouble when you put it. If you snake this out, getting it back in there, getting this plastic thing back in there, it's going to be a major pain in the butt. So just remember how it goes. It goes on top, goes through this clip here, along the plastic case, underneath here, then on top over here. You're supposed to have 2 little plastic clip valves that are holding this in place. Mine broke off last time I checked the valves. It hasn't been a problem for me. You don't hear anything or whatnot. They're like, I don't know, 5-cent clips. They're very easy to break, and I don't have them. These caps here, you have to remove those. This one has 2 bolts on this side, 2 bolts on the other side as well. Just undo those, then these kind of snap off. They kind of pop into place. This top one is actually held in place by, there's kind of a lip that goes underneath this here, and it just holds in place that way. These rear ones are really just snap in place. Right, look at this. Well, my air filter is going to be slightly in the way, but it just snaps right off. When you're removing all these cables, there's a screw right there. You take that screw off. These two bolts and the bolt that's at the front here, I just removed it. Alright, once you've detached everything, I've got the plugs undone, got my cables out. I'm actually going to remove these two connectors here so that this is loose. And then I'll be able to slide it through underneath. I'll be able to snake it through so that it comes out over here. Then I'll be able to really move this whole bracket out of the way. It's a little hard to describe, but you're just snaking things through so that you can move that bracket out of the way to get access to the rear cap. There's one there, one there. Alright, now I got it over onto the side. We're going to have to remove this here. It's just connected, now that the screw was removed at the beginning, it's just connected by the hoses. So we're going to disconnect this hose right here. We should be able to move it around the hose at the back here as well. This one here. Do not touch that one. Alright, now that everything's out of the way, I'll be able to have access to the valves right there. We have to remove this cap here. And, well, you can't really see it from this angle, but there's a cap on the side there. Right down there. Same as the front, I'll just remove those. Those will be my valve caps. You're going to need to remove all the bolts around this crankcase cover. That'll come right off, and then there'll be a little cap underneath. You take that off as well, and then you'll have access to the crankcase. Make sure your bike's in neutral. Well, because as soon as you start turning your crankshaft, if your bike's not in neutral, it's going to want to move forward. So if you forget to do that, you'll realize it real quick when you start to turn the crankshaft. What you want to make sure is you turn the crankshaft. You may not be able to see it with this lighting. Oh, there you go. You have a pin on the wall there, and you have two marks, an F and an FT. We're adjusting the front valves right now, so that pin needs to be dead on the line for the FT. Not the F, not in between. Dead on the line for the FT. If you're at the top dead center, you got to make sure your pistons are at top dead center. To check that, I mean, set it on the FT. Check your valve heads. There should be a wobble on them. They should be loose. Check your valves. You'll see it'll be with your feeler gauge. It'll be loose. Make a single rotation. Come back to the FT. Check them again. They should be tight, or they should be less loose than the other case. When you adjust them, you loosen this bolt right here. Then you use your valve adjustment wrench on the 4mm head here on top to turn, to loosen or to tighten the arm. And then when you use your feeler gauge right in there, what you're going to do is you're going to put your feeler gauge in, you're going to tighten it until it won't come out anymore. Then you'll slack off just a little bit to see, you're supposed to have some pressure on it. It's comparable to putting a sheet of paper between your fingers and pulling that sheet out. You can feel that there's resistance, but it does come out. Once it's there, you hold the screw here in place with your valve adjustment wrench, and then you tighten this bolt right here so that it doesn't move. And that should be good. Do all three. Your intake as well as your exhaust should all be at top dead center at the same time. Alright, so I just adjusted them. Before, when you saw them, they were like crazy loose. Now the arm here, you gotta make sure that when it's all the way up at the top, all it could fit is this feeler gauge in there. And it's hard to do with one hand, but that feeler gauge has a slight resistance on it. Well, it's hard to do with one hand, but the feeler gauge has a slight resistance on it, and all I could fit between the adjustment head and the valve is that feeler gauge. So when I take the feeler gauge out, you'll see, well, maybe you can't see it, but the valves could move, but just ever so slightly. Don't know if you see that. They're moving just ever so slightly, just enough. Just enough for the feeler gauge underneath. Here's the exhaust. You could hear that. It's a little easier to see and to hear because the exhaust is a 0.3 rather than a 0.15 for the intake. So it's a bit of a wider gap. Just to double check my work, what I did is I went back and I turned the crankshaft one full cycle, but I put it right back on the FT mark again. This time, when I go to my valves, even my exhaust valve, it ain't budging. It's tight. And there's no way, I tried with the feeler gauge, there's no way I'm getting a feeler gauge in there. Same thing for the front, for the intake valves. So that means that when I adjusted them before, I really was at top dead center. Now obviously I checked that they were looser before I adjusted them, so I knew I was already at top dead center. But this is just a way of double checking that after you've adjusted them, one full rotation clockwise, then check the valves again. You can see they're not budging, so now they're on a compression stroke. So I was top dead center when I adjusted them. Now we have to go off and do the rear. For the rear caps, the exhaust cap over here, it's a lot easier to take off from the left side of the bike. Alright, now that we're doing the rear, make sure you turn the crankshaft to the RT line, not the F, the RT line. The F is the firing, the RT is the rear timing. So because we're doing the rear, we're going to set it to the RT. We're going to check our valves. We've got to make sure that pin right on the side there has to line up with the RT. I can't zoom in. We're going to check our valves, see how loose they are. We'll do one full turn clockwise. Check the valves again, see how loose they are. The rotation at which the valves were their loosest is top dead center. That's where we have to adjust them. Alright, we've adjusted everything now. Now we have to go for reassembly. When we're going to be putting the caps back on, there's a little rubber gasket on them. You can see the little O-ring around it. Just put what I do is I have the engine oil. I put my thumb on the top of the bottle. I turn the bottle over so there's a bit of oil on it. Then I rub that O-ring on my thumb so it just has a bead of oil on it, and I put it back. That way it's not going to stick, and it'll last you longer. So I've checked and I've double checked and I've triple checked my valves, and I made sure that I was at top dead center. Made sure that I had the right feeler gauges. I made sure that I was at the right crank shaft setting for the front, for the rear. Now it's just a question of putting it all back together. Alright, moment of truth. I got everything connected back. Here's a good thing about having the tank off on the side like that. I got gas. I actually could try everything before I put everything back together. Made sure everything was plugged back in. And I'm just going to start it, see how it sounds.